Hello and welcome. This is Area of Study 2, the second topic in its culture and ethnicity. So, how multicultural is Australia? Well, if you have a look at those awesome Indigenous maps, you'll see that there were over 500 different tribal groups in Australia pre-1788. As Indigenous people will say, Australia's been very multicultural for tens of thousands of years. But in terms of settler society, Australia federated. Remember, the colonies got together and voted to become one country. That happened on the 1st of January 1901. A really big reason for that was to protect the white working man. So there were a couple of the most common groups. We had Pacific Island workers who were working in fruit plantations in Queensland. There were also quite a few Chinese people who had come over in the 1850s to mine gold. The colonies wanted to have a shared agreement and like a common set of laws across all of the colonies to keep non-white races out, basically. And they thought that by federating into one country, they'd have a better chance of doing that. So the White Australia policy, yeah. So as soon as Australia became a country in 1901, it enacted what's called the White Australia policy. So the first part of that was the Immigration Restriction Act 1901. The White Australia policy lasted for about half a century, so it started to get dismantled in 1949. Wasn't completely dismantled until 1973. So those two dates there just mean it took 24 years to dismantle the White Australia policy completely. So the White Australia policy meant a priority for Anglo-Celtic, so that's people from the UK and Ireland. That's English, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish and Irish people and their identity, their political ideology and their culture. Australia's history of multiculture. Right, so obviously in 1901, 77% of Australians were born in Australia. The vast majority of those people who weren't Australian born came from the UK. The UK is still the biggest source of migrants to Australia, but it's certainly a lot smaller as a proportion than it used to be. Now, mid-20th century, Australia became less multicultural, yeah? So by 1947, just before a huge wave of migrants who came to Australia after World War II got here, 90% of people in Australia were born in Australia. Fast forward to right now, and we're a very multicultural country. We're more multicultural than we've ever been. 1/3 of people in Australia were not born here. The other 2/3 were. So there you go. Now, this is a clip from a TV show called Voice of the People, which as far as I can tell is just some rando going up asking people questions on the street. This is, it was asking people in 1964 what they thought of the White Australia policy.
Think of the White Australia policy?
Well, I think it's good, and they should really have it and keep out the coloured races.
You think even
Yes, I think it's a little bit late for that. I think we should put Asians in. I don't think we can expect to keep it like forever. I shouldn't think, because the coloured races, when they get into a white country, then they want them to marry, and I don't think it's fair on the children. And no, I don't think at all that they should allow coloured races into Australia.
The White Australia policy, well, I think you have to live in a country before you can decide upon it. People here don't live with Aboriginals, do they? But in New York, they live side by side with culture. I come from New York. And I wouldn't care to have them living in the same house as me.
I suppose everybody should have the same rights in this world.
In what respect? Well, do you think it should be discontinued at this stage? Or?
No, I don't. I think it should be continued.
Even more forcefully, then?
Even more forcefully.
Why is that?
Well, I believe in the way things are at present. When it's
take into consideration what's happening overseas in South Africa and those places, we seem to be very well off here.
Do you think we can keep it straight along with the tides and forces running at the moment?
Yes, I don't think there's any reason why we can't. Everybody takes a proper attitude towards it. I don't think we could have anything else but a wider straight
Well, it's most misunderstood overseas. I think it has its good points. It should be more thoroughly explained to people so they can appreciate the problems involved, rather than just say wide straight of policy and that's it.
What do I think of it? I think it's very good.
You'd see it kept in force.
I would think so.
Why?
Oh, well, I have no particular reason.
well, I'm in favour of it to a point.
What point would that be?
Well, I do think that we should keep our country. Let's say as wide as possible, but we have our own natives that we should look after.
You say white in a purely coloured sense or some economic necessity?
Well, no, I think that we should have migration is a very good thing. But I think we should stick more to British migrants.
White Australian policy? Well, I think it's all right as far as it goes, but I still think we should give our Abos a good fair go.
I don't altogether agree with it, but just the same I wouldn't like to see the place overrun by all these other nations.
Well, the policy in itself is a crude attempt to limit the influx of foreign people into the country. That in itself is good. But on the other hand, it is an open manifestation of racial discrimination. And that in itself, of course, is inhuman.
Oh, well, no, I don't think it's fair. I think that when, different countries just make good citizens, that they should be admitted to the country. Don't you think so?
Why do you think it sprang up?
Oh, well, I don't know. I suppose to leave white Australia.
We might leave it there, but you'll notice that a lot of the views that Australians on the street had in 1964 were very different to what you'd hear today. I can't imagine many people in 2020 agreeing with the White Australia policy or having some of those views, but there was still quite a bit of a diversity of views. Look, I'd say that in general society was far more racist 50 years ago than it is today, but there was still people who weren't as racist, shall we say. Here's a little slide showing the change in diversity in Australia. On the right you've got the census from 2011. On the left you've got the census from 2016. If you have a look at the change just in those 5 years, you'll see that the trend is less people speaking English, more people speaking Mandarin, more people speaking Arabic and other Asian languages like Cantonese and Vietnamese. People classifying Australian-born people's going down. The number of English-born migrants has gone down, and the number of Chinese and Indian-born migrants has gone up. Interestingly, in the religion one, no religion is now the most popular form of religion, whatever that means. So, this is an animation showing the history of Australia's immigration statistics. We're not going to watch all of this, but we might just have a look at the start and the end of it. So if you have a look there, in 1854, by far and away the biggest number of migrants were from England, Ireland, Scotland, and there was hardly any other countries at all. I'm just going to skip right through. So in 1901, when the country federated, we again still had most migrants from England, Ireland, Scotland, but then there was small numbers from a lot of different nations. Let's skip all the way forward to 2019. Here we go. Right, so this is the profile now, and this list goes down. There's migrants from well over 100 different countries, I would imagine. The UK still number 1, but now we've got China number 2, New Zealand, India, and a lot of other Asian nations are represented in there. Australia is situated off Southeast Asia, and it's also in the West Pacific. Now, Australia always saw itself as like an outpost of Europe, European culture, specifically British, but now it's coming more to terms with the idea that it is actually situated in or near Asia. So there's way more migrants from Asia than there used to be. So the reflection activity I want you to do here, thinking of the word ethnicity. When you think, using that as your stimulus. When you see ethnicity, what do you see? When you think ethnicity, what do you think? And what do you wonder about ethnicity? What questions do you have about ethnicity? So just write that down in your exercise book. Thanks. And for homework, I want you to make a really simple family tree with yourself, your parents, and your grandparents, and your great-grandparents if you can get that far back. And I just want you to note down the birth locations and the ethnicity. Remember, 1/3 of Australians were born overseas, but most people have got at least one grandparent that was born overseas.